year 2020 was unique by all standards. The high points and low points were major turning points that defined and shaped the year. For the National Assembly, it was also quite a spectacular legislative year, as they also had to adjust to the new normal necessitated by the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. They passed critical bills, debated on matters of national importance, and made several resolutions. In 2020, the National Assembly grieved the loss of some of its members that died in the course of the year. Also, new members were elected to fill vacant seats in the legislature. What a year it has been for lawmakers. This is the Hallowed Chambers. I am Jesu Adeoye. Today we will take a look at the Senate in retrospect in the year 2020 and how the upper legislative house discharged its constitutional role of lawmaking. Joining me to help us get a sense of what went down in the Senate is the Senate spokesperson, Senator Ajibola Bashiru. It's good to have you on the program, sir.
Yes, let's be here.
Okay, the year 2020 has been one of all sorts for Nigerians. For the Senate, when you cast your mind back, how would you say the Senate has performed?
I will say that it's been a challenging year for the Nigerian Senate, and at the risk of saying that we are blowing our own trumpets, I will say that we have performed within the constraints of the challenges of 2020. And I will say that we actually started the year 2020 on a very high note, having fulfilled our intention to ensure that we revert back to January-December budget cycle, and also being able to pass necessary legislations that will facilitate the expansion of revenue, particularly the Finance Act 2020 and the Deep Offshore Profit Sharing Contract Act of 2020. So we started 2020 orbit in line with actualization of the legislative agenda. As you will recall, Senate, indeed the Ninth Assembly, had what we call the agenda of a National Assembly that worked for Nigeria. And of course, you will discover that by the time the index case came about around 27th of February 2020, and subsequently lockdown of the country around March 21, the plenary had to be suspended for close to about 5 or 6 a month. But notwithstanding, going by the volume of legislative activities, the level of oversight function, and strategic intervention in the area of economy, governance, and people-oriented policy formulation, I would say that we have done very well in the current year. And I will give examples, if I may be permitted. First and foremost, one of the challenges facing our country, even currently, is the area of security. Within the current year, we were able to set up a committee to look into the security situation in the country, upon which a summit was held, headed by the majority leader of the Senate, Dr. Yahya Abdullahi. And on February 17, even before the COVID-19 lockdown, we passed the recommendations. At the high point of those recommendations on the need to re-examine the security architecture of our country in terms of personnel of the Nigerian police, in terms of decentralization of the Nigerian police along zonal line, and decentralization not just to be administrative, but budgetary and operational. And of course, we also work assiduously in ensuring the passage of the Police Act. You will recall that more than 6 decades ago, we have had an obsolete police legislation, which we were able to do and pass this year, and has been assented to by the government. So in terms of area of looking at security, the National Assembly has been upbeat. We have also had occasions to pass relevant resolutions and call for intervention in area of specific security breakdown in terms of act of banditry, Boko Haram insurgency, and act of kidnapping in some part of the country. The National Assembly has been very active in passing relevant legislation. One of these is the Company and Allied Matter Act. You will recall that the last act was passed in 1990. So 3 decades, there has not been an amendment of the legislation. But this, the past year, 2020, we were able to pass that legislation to ensure transparency in corporate governance, and also ensuring liberalization of doing business in Nigeria with a view to facilitate both local and foreign investment. Then the Bank and Other Financial Institution Act has also been a legislation that was close to 2 decades old. We were able also to pass this very important legislation, and being able to incorporate experience of the past 2 decades in the BOFIA that was in existence. Then aside this, we also passed legislation in the area of liberalization of railway system with a view to expanding transport infrastructure in Nigeria. You will discover that there used to be monopoly in railway operation. With this legislation, it's now possible to have concession and active private sector involvement in the railway sector. So these are critical aspects of legislation that assist in growing the economy. And of course, a part of it is also the need to readjust the 2020 Appropriation Act in view of the reality of the COVID-19 pandemic and the effect that it has on the global oil market. It got to a point that the petrol is being sold in the international market at even far less price than the cost of production. So in this area, not only that we passed the amended 2020 Appropriation Act, we also had to relook at the medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper to be able to accommodate the new challenges that COVID-19 and the drop in international oil market. Of course, the Finance Bill 2020 also has to be amended and make necessary adjustments to ensure that revenue is accruable in a way that is also not excruciating on the vulnerable part of society. The National Assembly, particularly the Senate, was able to start the honest nest with the NDDC probe, and also probe into certain other what were considered to be misfeasance in the area of utilization efficiently and without corruption, resources appropriated to agencies of government. And just like has been promised last year, we were also able to pass the budget of 2021 within record time, and graciously it has been assented to by the president yesterday. So the commitment to having a January-December budget cycle with a serious commitment to have a determinable fiscal policies and fiscal framework in Nigeria is being attained. And of course, a novel intervention, legislative intervention by the National Assembly has to do with what do we do with the 2020 budget. You discover that because of the lockdown, there were lockdown in the economy, a lot of activities could not be carried on. So as at the time that we are winding up 2020, we discovered that more than 70% of resources and finance for capital projects had been sent to different MDAs. If we allow the 2020 budget to lapse in December 2020, it will mean that the process of returning this money may not give way for proper accountability and may also deny necessary influx into the economy. So the National Assembly, upon the request and understanding with the executive, were able to extend the implementation of the 2020 Appropriation Act to March 31st, 2021. It will mean that as now the 2021 capital expenditure will run concurrently with the remaining part of the 2020 capital expenditure. And we believe that the influx of resources, influx of capital will assist in us to attend to the problem of recession, which we are having the second one in the last 4 years.
Let's speak about the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic around the world, especially in Nigeria. We, of course, know that this was a really defining moment in the year 2020. But a lot of Nigerians believe that the federal government did not really handle things well in terms of the impact it had on the lives of many Nigerians, especially the average Nigerian. What, in your own perspective, how would you say that the National Assembly performed in its own duties in this regard?
I think I will first disagree on the criticism levied against the executive that they have not performed creditably well in handling the issue of pandemic. And my disagreement with this will also dovetail into what the National Assembly had done in terms of collaborating with the executive in achieving optimal response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I will say that just as the name of the virus itself, it is called novel coronavirus, something that is unprecedented. I don't think any part of the world actually prepared in terms of facing the challenges. Yes, when the COVID-19 broke out, it was said that Africa and some other part of the third world were less prepared. But as you will see, the outcome of the outblow of the pandemic has shown that notwithstanding level of whatever preparedness, it has taken every nook and cranny of the globe by shock. Advanced countries like United States, UK, Italy, Spain, they are facing serious problem as we speak now. So I would say that our intervention as a country is optimal. And what do I mean by being optimal? Right from the time that the news of the breakdown of the Wuhan virus, the National Assembly engaged with the leadership of the health sector and they were able to come up with an on-the-spot assessment of readiness in terms of the isolation center even before the first index case on February 27, 2020. We're able to also ensure prompt appropriation of special funds which were deployed to begin to set up isolation center and of course to make special procurement for the PEP and some other items. And when you see it also, as of today, the federal government had released no less than 50 billion to the states as special intervention for COVID. The states that receive less, those states will receive 1 billion each. States like Lagos, for instance, receive 10 billion. So in terms of financial support to be able to address the COVID-19, I think the federal government had discharged itself creditably, well. The net effect, possibly in a way that could be negative, was reduced by the already introduced social intervention program of the federal government in terms of trader money, in terms of a conditional feeding program, and in terms of other special intervention like the Empower. So overall, yes, there were challenges which also affected everywhere. Even advanced economic like United States had job loss of well over 30 million. So it's not something peculiar to us, but as it were, we will also believe that there is a need for cooperation of our people, particularly in terms of ensuring social distancing, washing of hands, and ensuring the use of face masks. This will save us a lot of resources that we will use to tackle with the negative economic effect rather than using it as a means of treatment or as a means of therapeutic suppression of COVID-19.
Okay. In the year 2020, we witnessed severe security challenges in the country's national life. And as expected, lawmakers expressed their displeasure, or would I say concerns, deep concerns about the country's security challenges and even tried to prefer solutions through some resolutions made by both chambers of the National Assembly. But it appears as if the presidency called the bluff of both chambers of the National Assembly, with his decision not to honor the invitation of the House of Reps. How would you say the National Assembly members are reacting to this?
I think I will rather not agree with the word of the president calling the bluff of the National Assembly. We have to be abreast of the fact that Nigeria is a country under the Constitution. And of course, the powers, responsibilities, and duties of each and every arm of government is stipulated in the Constitution. As to executive powers, which is about implementation, is vested in the president by Section 5 of the Constitution, and the legislative activity and power is vested by Section 4 of the Constitution. At times when resolutions are passed, what is the legal nature of resolutions? The legal nature of resolutions is that it is advisory, and it is in the context of the people's representative making a profound advice to the executive. Of course, whether an advice will be taken or not will depend on a lot of factors. There may even be some reasons which is not known to those that have given advice. Then on the question of invitation and summon, it's a matter that has to do with how have we deepen and interpret our provisions. When you talk of invitation, it involves sense of voluntariness, for which out of courtesy you may decide to honor the invitation. But when it comes to summon, it is arguable whether the National Assembly really have the power to summon the president in view of the provisions on immunity of the president, by which the president and the governor are not amenable to coercive the authority of the law. So what we may be thinking, rather than seeing it as a face-off, is that perhaps it may be necessary, and I raise this at the level of plenary, that we need to amend the Constitution so that the National Assembly can have a say in hiring and firing of service chiefs, so that we will not be left to the whatever the executive will in that circumstance. And you will see that democracy is strengthened when, from experience, you discover that there is a lacuna in enabling legislation, then you make amendment to be able to address that. But I believe beyond what possibly members of opposition and, of course, some good intention Nigeria will also want to say, we are still engaging with the executive and see how we'll be able to resolve the issue of security. And I say, why the National Assembly became incensed is that aside the fact that we are elected representative of the people, we also sworn to the Constitution, and Section 14.2 of the Constitution make it that welfare and, in fact, security and welfare.
Okay, some Nigerians believe that the national security threat we are currently faced with is because of poor funding. Even some lawmakers have become loud advocates for improved military funding. If this is actually the case, why hasn't the Senate moved to increase appropriation for this all-important sector?
I will say that those that talk about funding as basically being the problem, they are trying to scratch the surface and possibly make political statements of national challenge. It's not just the huge resources that have been appropriated. The question is, how effective have we been able to oversight that they have been used judiciously? In fact, on the contrary, some of us feel that what we rather need to do is to ensure transparency, accountability as to the huge resources made available for security. But beyond funding, the necessary equipment you need to combat this terrorism are not produced locally. So you need collaboration with manufacturing companies, those who manufacture armament, to supply us. I know some countries still have not agreed to supply Nigeria with necessary armament. So even if you appropriate all the resources and you cannot get necessary procurement or what you require, is a challenge. Then secondly too, particularly the Boko Haram insurgency has international dimension. You are seeing a cross-border insurgency involving at least 4 countries: Nigeria, Cameroon, Chad, and the Niger Republic. You need collaboration. You need active joint force, which we are still prospecting and working upon. So even it's not just about seeing it as a matter of funding. Then also, for every insecurity, there are sociological underpinning of those. Part of the challenge is the question of mass unemployment, illiteracy, out-of-school children, which has created a situation whereby there are a pool of unemployed, unengaged youth readily amenable to recruitment by the Boko Haram insurgency and the bandit. So we need to address a whole gamut of issues, which include issue of governance, issue of economic productivity, issue of engagement of our people in employment, and issue of a better standard of living of our people. So it goes beyond just talking about funding. Even the funding that we have done, we must ensure there's adequate oversight, there's adequate accountability in that regard.
Some critics of the Senate say that the lawmakers are now more detached from people of their constituency in terms of maybe intervention or what have you. How would you respond to this accusation?
I would say that those people are perhaps the ones that are detached from the people of Nigeria. For instance, I'm from Osun Central Senatorial District. Just less than 2 weeks ago, I engaged my constituents. We had part of our solar intervention project and also part of my own personal donation. We have empowerment for about 600 people. I think your station covered the story. If you see the tumultuous crowd, notwithstanding the challenge of COVID-19 and the enthusiasm shown by the people, I think if I will use my own as example, and I've also seen many of my colleagues that also engage.
But the major argument here was that the bills that are being brought to the floor of the Senate do not reflect the interest of these Nigerians.
I don't know what you mean by bills. So I've talked about KAMA. KAMA is to liberalize business environment in Nigeria. Does that not go to develop the economy? I've talked about Banks and Other Financial Institutions Act. We have talking about the amendment of the Police Act. We have even talked about the Finance Act. Under the Finance Act, any business that has less than 25 or less than 25 million turnout are exempted from VAT. And of course, there is also the provision that also exclude the low-income earner from income taxation. I think most of the time, our critics don't even study our law. They don't even study the activity of the National Assembly. They just assume that it's only by shouting and by fighting that you will be able to attend to the needs of the community. So if you look at the Finance Act, the way we have amended the Capital Gains Act and all other relevant revenue in favor of the vulnerable and the poor in the society, while making taxation more amenable for those who can really pay, the rich and the affluent in society, you see that we are pro-people. And that is reflected in the work we have done.
The National Assembly, as the people's parliament, is supposed to grant unhindered access to people, citizens in particular. But what we see now is that it has turned to some kind of fortress of some sort, where we see gun-wielding security operatives, preventing citizens from carrying out their rights to protest or to demand for their rights. Don't you think this is widening the gap between the representative of the people and the people themselves?
I don't agree with you. I don't think anybody has come to National Assembly to protest and was molested. In fact, before the shared movement overstressed themselves and had to incur the intervention of Nigerian security operative, they turned practically National Assembly to their resumption place every day. And nobody touched them. Even at the National Assembly, anybody that come to protest will go there. You will recover when even the NSAS people came. I even attempted to speak with them. I was pelted with stones. I was pelted with something. So even the protesters themselves.
It seems like more of a struggle before they get your attention.
It's not a question of struggle. I left the plenary. I was mandated by leadership to leave the plenary together with my colleague, the chairman, Senate Committee on Police Affairs, to talk to them. But their mindset was not to even listen to anybody, but just to create scene, thinking that they, according to some of them, that they are molesting us. You don't come with the mindset of molesting representatives. I was a student activist. I graduated after a period of 12 years, having studied and expelled from two universities on the ground of activism. We never degenerated to the level of having leaderless organizations without clear perspective on how you want to achieve your aim. So the question of people having access to them, I went there voluntarily, and yet even before I uttered the first statement, some of them started throwing pet bottles at us. That is not the way we were taught to protest. That was not the way we protested during our own time. And even at that, they were left. And when, possibly became tired, they leave. So nobody had harassed anybody, intimidated anybody from protesting. But even the level of the so-called who protest, do they really genuinely protest? For instance, somebody said that I want to protest that the president should go. The way to get the president go is for you to prepare, contest election, and get him defeated in an election. You don't turn protest as an instrument for regime change.
That is our program for the week. Do join us again next week for another episode. Also follow us on all our social media platforms to get fresh updates. Follow me on Twitter. My handle is @Tijesu Adiri TVC. From the Hallowed Chambers crew, thank you for watching. See you next time.